Hi. Today I'm going to talk about what I believe yoga therapy does and how this can help adult survivors of childhood trauma. I'm going to use the example of neck pain as a way to illustrate all this. Lots of trauma healing practices or methods use very slow body movements to help the person really feel and sense what is going on in that particular place in the body. And when we move the body slowly, it's really important to move so slowly, it's almost imperceptible to an outside person, but to move so slowly so that you can access each little degree of angle at the joint. So for example, if I have left side neck pain, sure, I could use a tool, a ball, self-massage. I could even stretch. And all those things could help. But if I go into a stretch really fast and I go to end range of motion, wherever that is, I'm missing out on the really small angles of the entire range of motion. I'm just going right to the end range of motion to stretch. But somewhere between neutral and the end range of motion, there is one particular angle, or maybe a few, that hold memories, that holds the trauma, that holds the deep historical pain. And if we bypass that, we miss out on the opportunity to really resolve that pain or to really feel. And feeling is rather important when it comes to trauma healing. A lot of us don't want to feel anymore pain, but it's through that wound that we heal. So, for example, I have had in my life excruciating neck pain to very mild neck pain. And I have limitations on the left side of my neck. So you'll see here that my range of motion to turn to my right, I can see way behind me. I can go past there. Try to keep my shoulders really still, and I'll turn my head, and I can get that far. If I turn to the left, right there is where I begin to feel the limitation. Right there is where I begin to feel the sensation of pain. It's very, very, very mild, and if I kept going and forced it, that pain increases. So you'll see that to the right, there's a lot more freedom, a lot more mobility, but to the left, not much. Now, through years and years of self-study, through yoga practice, with therapy, I have figured out a lot of what's going on here in my neck. That physical therapy, chiropractic, tools, stretching doesn't touch. It doesn't heal it. And I'm not saying that those modalities don't work. They're fine. And if that's your starting point, great, go there. I've been down that road. They all serve their purpose. But in terms of really getting to the root of the pain, and then how it can give you freedom from not only pain, but from the trauma, we need to move slowly and move in very small degrees. So a little background history to help illustrate. I'm going to tell you a story from my past, and this story can be difficult to hear. I don't want any pity for this story. I have definitely healed. What I'd like you to try to hear is not the content of the story, but the wisdom of the body, the intelligence of the body. Try to look for that, or try to hear for that when you're listening to the story. When I was a child, around 10 years old, I was living under pretty harsh conditions with a mother who was extremely violent and would abuse my sister and I. And one of her techniques would be to take the plastic runner. This might be from the 80s. I'm not sure if people use plastic runners anymore, but it's like a thin plastic runner that you'd put in the hallway over the carpet to prevent stains and wear and tear. And on one side of the carpet, one side of the runner, it's very, very smooth, but on the other side, there are spikes which get pressed into the carpet to keep the runner steady. And one technique that my mother used was to flip over this runner so that the spikes were up. And she would make my sister, who at the time probably was around 12, 13 maybe, she'd make my sister kneel on those spikes for an extended period of time. And this could happen during a beating session, before or after. And I, as the younger sister, was not subject to that at the same time. Typically the beatings happened separately. But I knew that my sister would be kneeling on the spikes. And all that I wanted to do was save her from that. But I couldn't because I was little. But I would come down the staircase because the hallway where this runner was parallel to the staircase. So I could lay my stomach on one of the steps and look my head through the bars, and I could see her, and we could connect. And I could have eye contact with her so she wouldn't feel so alone in her suffering. And I guess so I wouldn't feel alone in my suffering of not being able to help her. The top of the staircase had a wall, and then the wall cut off at a certain point, and then it was just space and the banister. And I figured out as a little kid that I could lay on the step that was just before the wall ended and lay my stomach down, and then if I looked to the left, I could see the kitchen where my mother usually was, throwing things, banging cabinets, screaming, slamming pans, and, having her mental breakdown in the kitchen while my sister was on the runner on her knees. And I figured out that if I laid my belly on the step just before the wall, she wouldn't be able to see me. And I could see her, then I could know when she was going to come out. And that's when I would get up and run back upstairs, because I couldn't be caught. I knew that if I was caught, something extremely bad would happen. Either my sister would get more beatings or I would get beat. The situation felt absolutely life-threatening. On the staircase, I would lay on my belly and I would look to the left. And I would look to the left and hold the look, and I would hold that look in fright, in hypervigilance. This happened over and over and over again in my childhood. So my body learned this particular motor pattern. That's a sequence of muscles and in which order they turn on to perform a certain movement, and the tension in that kinetic chain to perform that movement. This motor pattern was conditioned into my body. And it was conditioned under a life-threatening situation. So that's how my body kind of memorized that when I turn to the left, it means life-threatening situation. It is coupled with fear. This motor pattern is coupled with vigilance, hypervigilance. So much like a deer in headlights, you can't take your eyes off the threat because you need to know what to do next. So that's how my body kind of memorized looking to the left. None of this is what was I aware of when I was a child. I was only completely in survival mode, and that's okay. That's what got me through it. That's why I can say I survived, because I used my body's intelligence to survive, to get through that moment. It wasn't appropriate in that moment to go into felt sense or trying to come out of it and recalibrate. That's not what the body does when it's in survival mode. For me, laying on my stomach looking to the left was more rooted in the freeze response and not really fight response. There was some flight. If I saw her coming, I would bolt up the stairs. But for the most part, it was freeze. So turning my head to the left now has the conditioning, the muscle memory of terror, hypervigilance, freeze. It doesn't have a lot to do with ease and joy and freedom and flexibility and all of that. Years later, in the process of healing this trauma, I was taught and then discovered and then kind of reworked and remastered for myself a way to release the terror, the hypervigilance, the freeze from my neck. As I showed you earlier, I still have residual tension there. But there was a point in my late 30s where I couldn't move my neck without fear that I would paralyze myself. That's how much tension was in my neck, because it was just growing from 10 years old until mid-30s. I hadn't known about this. I hadn't worked on it except for those other methods I taught, like chiropractic or tools or massage. I hadn't really gotten to the root of it. And so it only grew. And it affected the rest of my biomechanics. So that even turning to the right made me feel like an electric shock in my body. It made me very scared. Looking up, looking down, any movement of my neck. The thing is this. When that motor pattern comes about, or when you're in touch with the pain, the restriction, and you get there through slow, very slow movements, you instantly recognize it as something that feels kind of like it's outside of you. It's this thing that's on you. It almost feels like it's an entity living there, and it's not you. And you know that because in the practice, if we ask to mobilize the neck, so from here to here, nothing comes up. Memories don't come up. Sensations of pain, terror, vigilance, freeze, that doesn't come up. And then I move here. Still nothing. I'm still present here, at ease, feeling fine. And then I go here. And then here. And it's extremely slow. We're just moving very slowly. Feeling and noticing. until I get to a specific angle, a specific degree of that head to shoulder range of motion, which for me is about here, where I begin to sense the limitation. So from here to all the way to here, all good. But from here and back, it only gets worse. It gets more and more resisting, more and more pain. So the way that I was able to finally address this at a much deeper level and to resolve a lot of it was to have to experience that excruciating pain, the pain where I thought I would be paralyzed if I moved my head. And I also had to go through other modalities. Not because of denial, but because at the time I didn't know about the technique I'm teaching you now. But I did have the agency to go and find help. The pain was so bad and it was so scary, and I felt like it would affect my physical well-being, therefore my career, and all these other things. I couldn't play with my baby because my neck hurt. Moving, didn't want to move my neck, so I had to move my whole body to move my neck, these kind of things. It became so painful that I finally sought help. And that happens to a lot of us, right? We have to get to that threshold. And that's okay. It's all okay. Whatever your process is, it's okay. So I got to that point and I tried the different modalities and what I began to notice doing these different modalities, for example, with chiropractic. I love chiropractic. I have nothing against it. I've done a lot of chiropractic therapy. But what I began to notice is that when the chiropractor would adjust my neck, I didn't have anything to do with that. It was an outside thing happening to my neck. And yes, it gave me a moment of bliss, like feeling all those hormones and all the channel of energy opening up. Boom! Well, it felt great. But it wasn't long lasting. And it didn't take care of the memory of freeze, trauma, terror, hypervigilance. It didn't take care of that at all. So that was still very much alive in me. And those memories, those body memories of trauma will stay alive in your body until they're resolved. They can't be resolved with just the mind. They have to be resolved in the body. The body affects the mind affects the body, so you work with those two things together. But you cannot heal if you work with them separately. So when I realized that this was an outside source and it was only a temporary relief by grace, I realized that it had to come from me. Something had to come from me. And when I say me, I mean the life force that animates me. Not my flesh, my bones, but the life force that animates me. The life force that, in my opinion, comes from Source, God. I like to call it Source, that God is the source of all that was, all that is, all that ever will be. God is the source. That's the source. So it had to come from Source that inhabits my body. And I'm going to share with you the technique that I used to help heal not only the pain and give me a lot more range of motion than I used to have, but that has also profoundly helped me heal my understanding of myself coming out of trauma. See, when you're experiencing that traumatic event, you're not really experiencing you. You're not really experiencing your authenticity, your authentic self, the soul or the spirit, whatever you want to call it, that God has given you to animate your body, right? You're not experiencing that, in my opinion, in the moment of trauma. In the moment of trauma, or the moment of that high stress, I should say, trauma is a result of the unresolved stress, but in that moment of life-threatening stress, you're not experiencing really that. You're not. You're really focused on surviving. And that is part of our design, our beautiful design to survive. But it's not the authentic self. It's not what makes you, you. So I wondered, how could I access my authentic self to heal what I feel was coming from the outside and done to me? In other words, the question I would ask, and I still ask, is, who am I without the trauma? If all of that didn't happen to me, who would I be? And through therapy and yoga and self-study, I learned that the authentic self doesn't diminish, doesn't go away, it doesn't change really. It's always there. It was there from when I was conceived till right now. It can be obscured. And for most of us it is. And so returning to my authentic self, to me, has been one of the most important targets, one of my aims in everything I do. How do I access my authentic self if that authentic self has been so obscured by this life-threatening, recurring situation that I have not resolved? Seems like there's a brick wall in front of my authentic self, and that I'm not going to be able to penetrate that wall. That's what it felt like. But I used yoga and therapy and self-study to break down that wall. And I'm going to tell you the technique that I used in one day to recognize, to feel, to process, and to heal this pain. Where I can now look around and I'm okay. It's a big deal. Any of you who have survived trauma from your childhood and have healed body parts and healed paradigms, you know it's a big deal. So I had the day where I could sit down like I'm sitting now and say to myself, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out because I love myself. And for that little girl who had to endure that, I'm going to do it for her. Because she's innocent. She's full of love. And she's lovable. And the trauma, the situation, it's over. I don't still need to be carrying it. And that is very key in this technique, is to recognize that it's over. When our body holds the trauma memory, there's a part of us that doesn't really know it's over. That's very subtle and it's in the background. It's a subtle paradigm. A paradigm is like a certain way that we think about things. And then that way that we think about things becomes our actions. And then our actions start to build our world. Right? So I sit down and I take a deep breath of courage. And I take another deep breath of self-love. And the first thing to do is to become present. And presence is to, I hate to say focus on, but it's to sense the current moment you're in the place you're in. It's to sense with every fiber of your being the here and the now. So, one could sit, and I could do this like right now. Right now, I can show you it in this time, not like telling another story about how I did it, but like even in this moment, we can become present. So here I am, I'm sitting in this room. And in presence, I'm going to draw my attention to the walls. There's a wall there, there's a wall behind me, back here, and over there. I'm just going to feel the walls. I'm going to sense the walls. So even with my eyes closed, I can sense the container that I'm in. I can sense the floor and the ceiling too. And I might even go ahead and look at the wall. And in presence, I can almost try to look through the wall. And I can sense that there are beams in the wall. I can sense the drywall, maybe cement or whatever's on top of the drywall. I can even see the paint. And on my walls, the paint is texturized, so I can spend some time just really observing the wall and the texture of the wall. Until I have a knowing that the only thing that is a wall. It's not my history. It's not my perpetrator. The wall itself isn't going to come out at me. The wall is just a wall. And now I know that because I've spent time understanding that. And I know this seems like a silly step, but it's really important. It establishes me in the here and now. And I'm using the wall as a little hook to get me in. So there's the wall. I can tell what the wall is. I can see the texture. I understand it's not a threat to me. And so now that the wall is there, I feel safe. And I feel here. The next thing I notice is the space that's inside the wall. Because remember, I also know that there's an inside to that wall. The beams and the drywall and all that. And there's space inside that wall. So for just a moment I can try to sense and know that there's space in the wall. And that gives me more of a sense of safety, that there's space. And next I can begin to recognize the space that's between the wall and the parameter of my body. And I could just sense the space is there. And how I relate to the space, how the wall relates to the space. And that's just becoming present. That's just feeling the space. It's really easy. It takes a little time. And you notice the space. I'm rushing the process to describe it to you, but so I'm noticing the space. And then the next thing I can notice is my body in relation to the space outside the wall and the space inside the wall. I can notice my body, the space, and then through the wall. And that gives me more presence here and now and more safety. And then I can notice that within the parameters of my body, I too have space. And I can sit and start to bring my attention now from over there, closer and closer in, and in, and in, and notice the space within my body. And with courage and focus, I can attune to the space in my body without attachment, or without memories, or without judgment. I can just attune to it and feel spacious. And when I attune to it, suddenly the space inside my body feels really big. It feels really vast. It feels like way more space than could possibly exist in this parameter. And then I attune to that. That feeling of openness and vastness, and right? Because in trauma we get extremely tight focus. And so feeling that open space is very comforting and healing. And it brings the quality of safety, which is really important. And so I spend time establishing myself in the here and the now. And that's how I do it. I notice the extremities, and then I come closer in and closer in, and I do it at a pace where I can feel safe, and that safety grows, and where there is no story coming up. And if a story comes up, I'm going to pause there until the story goes away, and then I keep coming until I can come right into the center with no story and no judgment and no memories. It's possible. And by establishing myself in the here and now, I've established myself in safety. I am grounded. I feel here. Not there where the trauma was, but here. And that gives me personal power. That gives me the ability to have an anchor from which I will resource during this technique. The anchor for me in this process is presence itself, is the here and the now. I use the environment, I use the space, and I use that feeling of vast space inside of me to anchor me right here in the present moment. That's when you see images of the Buddha with one hand on the ground. That's what that means. He's anchoring himself in the here and now, and he needs his hand there to keep resourcing. So yes, presence becomes a resource during this technique to resource, to again plug into source. All that was, all that is, all that ever will be, all possibilities, the source of all, I'm going to resource it over and over and over again to keep me here, present, grounded, now, safe. Because now, it is safe. If you can watch this video, you're safe. So once I get there, and I have it feels like your battery is charged, you feel a sense of personal power, you feel a sense of resiliency, a sense of capacity. And once I have all of that, and this may only take 5 minutes, it can take as long as you need it, but once I have that, now I can draw my attention to the neck. And so I'll bring my attention here to where the pain is. And I'll start with courage and love and plenty of time to really feel what's going on in there. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to freeze, but I'm not going to, oh, there it is. I'm not going to do any of those harsh things. Right now, this is about feeling the wisdom, the intelligence, the memories, feeling the answers. Right there. They're all in the same place. The source where the problem is also where the answer is. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to feel it. I'm just going to notice what's there. And maybe as I notice what's there, I start to have a physical response. Because I'm tapping into pain, and I know, because I don't have a physical problem there. My vertebrae are fine. I don't have a structural problem that can be done with surgery, fixed with surgery. I don't have any of that. I'm going to feel the pain that's there. And that pain is historical. That pain starts way back over there on the steps, looking to the left, freezing with terror, hypervigilance. That's what that is. I know that. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to resource again. I'm going to tap in and I'm going to feel the pain, and something's going to begin to happen. And I might feel, for example, I get really hot. So maybe there's some shame there. Or maybe I get really cold because of the freeze. We tend to get cold when it's called freeze, right? Freeze. Or maybe I begin to cry. Maybe the tears are just single drops that come out real slow, because I'm not totally versed in crying. Or maybe they come out as weeps, really profound, deep grief and pain and sorrow. But something is going to happen as I'm sitting, sensing, and sensing. The body will begin to release. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. And when whatever that sensation is, or multiple sensations, when that arises, I'm going to use courage and love. I'm going to try to stick with it. And there will be a moment where I can't stick with it anymore. That moment may happen in half a second. It may happen in 3 seconds, it may happen longer, but there will be a moment where it's too much. And so what do? We come back. And we resource. I come back, I go to the wall, I go to the space, I go to my body, and I go in, I feel the vastness, and I resource. I recharge that battery, and I establish myself in the here and the now. And then when I feel that, when I feel capacity and personal power and self-love, I'll take it, take my focus, and I'll go back. And I'll go right back. And I'll notice again. Now what? At this point, I might have the wherewithal to start to turn the head. And so at some point I'm wanting to get to that point where it hurts. So let's say I finally get to here, and now the sensations are going to be bigger. And again, maybe my body temperature changes, maybe I start to cry, maybe other body parts start to tense up in response to that. Maybe I start to tremble. But with courage and love and the skill of resourcing, I can allow those sensations to be, because those sensations are in fact the resolution of the trauma. So I couldn't escape. I could not escape the home of terror. I couldn't. I was a child. I also couldn't save my sister from the spikes and from her beating. I was a child. I was younger than her. I couldn't fight my mother. She was a monstrous, powerful being. I couldn't fight her. All I could do was freeze. And at the last moment I could run up the stairs. So there was a little bit of escape, but not an escape from the situation, right? I could just go upstairs and refreeze in my room. So here I am now feeling these things. I might be crying, I might be hot, might be cold, might be shaking. I'm going to have courage and bravery and love to just feel that. And when that gets too much, whether it's 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is, when that gets too much, I'm going to turn my head and come right back to presence. And here's the magic. The magic is that the more you go back and forth, the more you establish yourself in the present moment. So your anchor is the here and now, and then you're just visiting the past. You come back, establish, visit. But when you visit there and you feel all these sensations, there is still a part of you that is present because you have the agency to come back, right? So in the moment of high threatening stress, it feels like you don't have the agency to come back to presence. It feels like you have one of three choices: fight, flight, freeze. And your body's going to do everything it can to get you out of that situation. It's not going to be like, let's work on our higher spiritual power. It's not going to do that. But here in this practice, you're only visiting there. So there's somewhat of a distance. Remember the space. Feel that distance. And you could be crying, you could be trembling, you could be hot, you could be cold, it could hurt, and you have the agency to come back. And you root yourself in here and now. And so really, this is a technique of coming back to here and now, not so much of going to the trauma. It's really more of always coming back here, of recalibrating. And the more and more you recalibrate, the more and more you regulate yourself, the more and more you come back to presence, the more and more you recall, recognize, and maintain your authentic self. The anchor is you. Not something from the outside, not the chiropractor, not the tool. Those work. But the anchor is you. It's your authentic self. The one that came into this world from day one that you still have today. It's been obscured, but you're learning how to see it. So every time you visit the past and you come back, you're recalling your authentic self. And then you're feeling it. You're in it. So it's not just an intellectual exercise, but it becomes a somatic exercise. You feel it. Your whole chemistry changes. This may only be 1 second, but it's going to be a powerful 1 second. And you can feel your authentic self. And the longer you can stay in that authenticity, the more it grows, the more you maintain it. And of course, then that grows, that becomes, the anchor, the North Star, and you're practicing how to resource, to keep coming back to that over and over and over again, that then you can do that later in life. You can do that. You can have a situation that's maybe not so charged as, say, recalling trauma, but it's a smaller situation, and you could say, oh, now I have evidence that I can go somewhere real hard, real horrific. I can look at that And I can come back, and I can come back here, now, and authentic. When you're here, when you're now, and you're authentic, you are in a state of ease, a state of well-being, the state of possibility, the state of being able to have a window of time to make the right choice. So after I spent time going back and forth between visiting the pain, feeling the sensations of pain, coming back into the present moment to anchor myself into me, right? To feel me, here, now, authentic, capable, loving. I've gone back and forth through all that. There will come a moment where my inner wisdom says, that's enough. That's enough of this exercise. We need to stop. Whenever that happens for you is when it happens. It's different for each person. And then the very next thing I do after that is I start to journal. I think this is a very critical step. I am going to take that pen to actual paper, and I'm going to write down the sensations and maybe the thoughts and the feelings that I had when I was rooted in my authentic self, here now. And I will write down what I can remember of being in that place, that pain place. And I will watch myself, my consciousness, my soul, my spirit will be the witness as I document this. And then I can see it later. Or I can see it right there. Or I can go back later and be like, wow. Evidence. It's so important that you have evidence that you can do this stuff. It can't be just intellectual. It needs to be felt. And I also believe that it needs to be somehow documented. Or somehow put onto record. Or somewhere witnessed. So that when you forget, because you will forget that you have this, you will forget that you've done it before, you will forget the evidence, you will go into that place where I can never, this is always the way it is, that's going to happen to all of us, that then you have the reference. So that's that little technique that I use. Again, that can be really short, it can be really long, it can be whatever, it can be any body part, any place in your body that you feel this. Now here's the thing. You can't just go from no self-work at all to this technique. It won't work. Because what will happen is it'll just become an intellectual exercise. And any work on the self is fine. So if it's an intellectual exercise for you, that's okay. It's just not going to get you to the true, real healing. It's not going to get you there. It's not going to soften, to release. It's not going to give you what you want, It's not going to change you. It's not going to transform this. It has to be felt. In order for you to get to this point where you can do this kind of work, this kind of healing, which is from you taking care of you resourcing you, it feels so good that I did this right for you to do it. You got to kind of have some prerequisites, and they're not hard. And I'm not saying you can't start on this, but again, if you want it to be very impactful, you need to have some base first. And that's where the yoga practice, for me, has helped. The yoga practice has 8 limbs, and every single one of these limbs is designed for the end goal of yoga. The end goal of yoga is to unite. That can be uniting with God, uniting with Source, uniting with presence, uniting with your authentic self, uniting with love. But it's uniting to definitely some kind of benevolent energy, and that you become one with that. What does it mean to become one with that? You have a felt sense of it. Your whole being feels it. not just intellectually. So to get to the place where you can unite, there's obstacles along the way. Those obstacles are many. I'm not going to get into it now. It could be physical pain. It could be a paradigm. I could never do this. So this is woo-woo. Oh, all of those things are obstacles. And the practice of yoga helps you to overcome those obstacles so you can get to the source, the goal, For example, yoga helps us with postures. Okay, so the postures in yoga, it can be about fitness, but it's not really about fitness. It's setting your body up in angles. Remember, we talked about angles, right? It's setting your body up in a shape that has angles, say angle, 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 angle. It has angles so that you can then feel what's going on at that angle. There's something going on. There's something going on. Maybe through the practice, maybe through all of this self-study, I can release that and experience something new, authentic. So the postures can help you that way. Also, the practice of yoga helps with breathing. There is a particular way that I was breathing when I was looking in the kitchen in horror and frozen. A certain way I was breathing. Some people breathe that way their whole lives. But we have breathing practices which give us an opportunity to see a different way. Oh, I can breathe here, in the center of my body. So breathing practices help. Mantra helps to repeat a phrase over and over and again, to allow that phrase to make a biological change in your chemistry, in your alignment, in your overall sense of how you're feeling in the moment, your state of consciousness. The mantra can help with that. Meditation can help. Meditation is sitting in stillness. So we learn through the practice how to be immobilized, but safely, not frozen, still. We find stillness in the body and in the mind through meditation. So all of the limbs of yoga are there to prepare you to unite. And the practice that I just described is the practice of uniting myself with presence where my authenticity is, where my true self resides. I can't recall it or recognize authenticity if I don't have these other skill sets beneath me. What I want to create is like a library, if you will, of resources, so that when I'm in a situation, I can go to my bookshelf and I can take out the breathing book and go, oh yeah, I don't have to breathe like this when I'm at the bank. I can breathe like this when I'm at the bank. Right? Or I can take out a resource of grounding, because I've practiced sitting. So when I speak to the adult survivors of childhood trauma, I want you to know that it is very possible to heal. And not only heal, but it's possible to know yourself in a way that you never even thought about. Again, the question is, who am I if that didn't happen? And I know that psychologists can tear that apart, maybe as denial, whatever, but in this context, who am I without that having happened? Or what was I before that happened? What was I as a fetus in my mom's belly? What is my authentic self? What is the animating force that is me inside this body. That's where we're going. That's where ease resides. And so the more and more you can bring yourself back to that moment, the more joy and freedom that you'll have in your life. You'll see things differently, and the world will respond differently to that. So it helps to have this resource, this archive of resource you can just pull off the shelf and utilize and really feel and attune to with every cell of your body, so that you can know your authentic self. You can know it. And knowing it is knowing it inside of you, every cell of your body. This type of work is what I consider to be yoga therapy. Yoga therapy is kind of a new and emerging field, I guess. It's hard to describe. A lot of people describe it differently. But for me, in the way that I do it, this is how I think yoga therapy works. It is building a skill set, having felt experience as evidence, so that you can unite with your authentic self, and sometimes that's through pain. And in doing that, the pain changes. Sometimes the pain even goes away. And this work can be done alone. Absolutely, it can be done alone. But it takes a lot of discipline to do it alone. It takes a lot of time to do this without any help. So you can go and you can read all these books on breathing. And you can read all these books on all the other techniques. And you could practice them at home. And you can do all that. And you can journal. And all of that is absolutely wonderful. And I suggest that you do it. You know, but there is something about having a teacher there that makes this practice a lot easier, or make this process a lot easier, and makes it more effective. So if you have a teacher or a therapist or someone that's done this before, they don't necessarily have to be a teacher, but they're very well versed in this. If you have that person with you, coaching you, guiding you, you feel that trust because they've been through it too, and they've come out of it. So you can feel the trust, and that trust creates safety, and we need the feeling of safety to get in there, right? We need to know it's not going to take us away. It's not going to overwhelm us. We need to feel safe, that we have the agency to come back, right? So the teacher can provide that there, or the friend, or can be the living evidence that it's possible. We're also human beings who are social creatures. We have a limbic brain, which means that we must use or be with other people to help regulate ourselves. We're not solitary creatures. We're not reptiles. We need other human beings to help regulate ourselves. So this person is with you, and they're not going back in time. They're not visiting their trauma. They're just with you as you're doing the work. So they are grounded. They are breathing in a way that is present. They are resourcing. Their energy, right, then affects your energy. And without going through all the science, it's true. The way someone's energy is directly affects ours. Our heart rates start to entrain, right? We almost carry the same posture that the person does in front of us. So that presence of of neutrality or grounded or ease anchors you. So this was all to say that there, in my opinion, there is yet another way to heal from childhood trauma. It doesn't have to stay with you forever. You are not defined by it. The pain that you feel in your body doesn't have to last forever. And it doesn't have to be surgery or some big deal or some medication. Those are all fine, but it doesn't have to be that. I'm just saying there's another option. There's another door. There's another way. And I'm sharing this way with you. This way has really, 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 really helped me a lot. So, I hope that in your process, or I hate to use the word journey, of self-discovery and of healing, that you feel inspired. You don't necessarily have to go do yoga, but you just at least feel inspired to aim your intention to the target of your authentic self. Who am I without any of that? Who am I without my stuff? Who am I without my looks? Who am I without my money? Without these people? Without, all this stuff. What is my authentic self? Because when I'm in and rooted in my authentic self, I am at ease. I am connected to Source. I can hear all the answers. I am pointed in the right direction to solve my problems. The world reacts to me differently. Things are drawn to me that I want. My desires are fulfilled. My purpose begins to be clear. Freedom. So hopefully this has inspired you to aim at you, your authentic self. You, innocent, pure, loving consciousness. Just you. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that. Namaste.